My own son, Michael, stood at his wedding table and laughed as he watched me eat the cold leftovers no one else wanted. He smirked and told his bride, "She's used to eating what life leaves behind." Everyone laughed, but inside I felt something snap. For years I had given him everything, my money, my time, my health, only to be treated as if I was nothing more than an unwanted guest. They thought I was weak, too old to matter. They thought I would swallow the shame in silence. But the next morning his hands trembled as he opened my email. I used to believe that life, in its cruel twists, would still grant me a soft landing in my old age. My name is Eleanor. I am 68 years old, and once upon a time, I was a nurse. I spent decades caring for strangers, holding dying hands, whispering comfort into ears that would never answer again. When my husband died, suddenly of a stroke, I thought my son, Michael, would be my reason to keep going. I sold the small house we had built together, put aside what little savings remained, and told myself that moving in with Michael and his new wife, Sophie, would mean family, warmth, and belonging. The day I carried my last box into their grand suburban home, Michael hugged me briefly, his eyes already darting to his phone. Sophie, radiant and polished, smiled warmly and said, "We're so happy to have you here." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. At the time, I forced myself to believe it was only nervousness, that she needed time to get used to me. I was given a room at the far end of the house, a narrow space beside the garage. The window looked out onto a brick wall, and when the cars started in the morning, the smell of exhaust leaked through the thin frame. Still, I told myself, it's just a room. What mattered was that I wasn't alone. In the beginning, I tried to convince myself that this was what home felt like. I made breakfast early, scrambled eggs just the way Michael loved when he was a boy. But when they came down, Sophie would wrinkle her nose politely and say, "Oh, we've decided to do smoothies instead." My eggs cooled untouched on the counter. Michael never looked at me when he followed Sophie out the door. Emma, my granddaughter, was the only one who seemed to notice me. She was 7, full of light and curiosity, and she would run to my room after school, climbing onto my lap to tell me about her day. I braided her hair and hummed lullabies I once sang to Michael. Those moments were my oxygen, the fragile proof that maybe I still had a place in their lives. But even Emma's visits grew shorter, as Sophie's sharp voice would call from the hallway, "Emma, let Grandma rest. She needs her space." I wasn't blind to the changes. Sophie kept a firm grip on the household. What was cooked, who visited, how money was spent. Michael, though successful in his career, deferred to her in every matter. It was easier for him to nod than to resist. I told myself he was busy, that he trusted her judgment, that deep down he still loved me. But love, I was learning, is not always enough to fight against convenience. The first real crack came one evening at dinner. I had roasted chicken, carefully seasoned the way Michael once begged me to make on his birthdays. As we sat down, Sophie offered a practiced smile. "Mother, I hope you're comfortable here, in this temporary space." Temporary. The word struck like a needle to the bone. I forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow in my throat. Michael said nothing. He carved the chicken, passed the best pieces to Sophie and Emma, and left me with the wing. That night, I lay awake in my narrow bed, the hum of the garage door still rattling in my ears. My chest ached with a pressure I couldn't shake. I had been welcomed as though I were an obligation, not a mother. I thought of the house I had sold, the nights I had worked double shifts, the meals skipped so Michael could have shoes, books, opportunities. All of it had been poured into him, and now, in this beautiful house, I felt like an intruder. Still, I reminded myself, family is family. A mother forgives. A mother waits. Maybe Sophie would warm to me. Maybe Michael would remember the woman who carried him through sleepless nights and scraped knees. I told myself these stories to ease the sting, even as my heart knew better. The next morning, Sophie placed a list on the kitchen counter. Groceries, chores, schedules for Emma's activities. "If you don't mind, Mother," she said with a thin smile. "This will help us all keep things organized." She was giving me a role, but not one of respect. It was the role of a housemaid. Michael kissed her cheek as if she had just solved a great problem, never glancing in my direction. And yet, I kept quiet. Silence, I thought, was the glue that would hold us together. But silence also buries you alive, and I could already feel the earth covering me, inch by inch. Looking back, I realize I ignored the signs. The cold politeness, the small slights, the way Sophie's smile tightened when I entered the room. I mistook courtesy for kindness, routine for affection. I believed I had found shelter when in truth I had stepped straight into the storm. At that moment, I didn't know the depth of what was to come. I didn't know how far betrayal could reach or how cruel indifference could cut. What I did know was this: every step I took deeper into that house was pulling me further away from the mother I had been and closer to the shadow of someone they wanted me to become. And yet, even as I tried to bury my doubts, a voice inside whispered a warning I could not silence. I just didn't realize then that stepping through that front door was not entering a safe haven. It was walking straight into a trap that had been waiting for me all along. The morning of Michael's wedding, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the pale blue dress I had saved for years, the one I never wore because I thought it would be for a special day. This was supposed to be that day. In my purse, I carried a small envelope, a savings account book that represented decades of careful sacrifice, every overtime shift, every meal skipped, every penny tucked away. It wasn't much by anyone else's standards, but to me, it was my legacy, my blessing for Michael and Sophie to begin their life together. When I arrived at the venue, I was swept into the crowd of relatives and friends. People bustled around, laughing, drinking champagne, while I lingered at the edges, hoping someone would guide me to where I belonged. A young attendant pointed me to a table far at the back of the hall, behind the pillars where the music echoed faintly and the view of the couple was obstructed by a floral arch. I forced myself to smile, convincing myself that it was fine. After all, the important thing was that Michael was happy. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Sophie glowed as she walked down the aisle, and Michael looked proud. I dabbed tears from my eyes, but no one noticed. When the applause erupted, I clapped quietly, my heart swelling despite the distance that separated me from the rest. Then came the dinner. Plates of food began to arrive at each table, laughter bubbling around me as glasses clinked. My table was the last to be served, and when the waiter finally reached us, only scraps remained: cold chicken, wilted vegetables, and congealed sauce. He set the plate in front of me with an apologetic shrug. I swallowed hard, lifted the fork, and tried to steady my hands. It was then that I heard Michael's voice, loud enough to carry across the tables. He leaned toward Sophie, grinning as if he had made a clever joke. "She's used to eating what life leaves behind." But the words landed like a blade. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. But then Sophie's laughter rang out, sharp and clear. Others around them joined in, chuckling, nodding, glancing my way with pity or amusement. My face burned. My son, my only son, had reduced me to a punchline in the story of his perfect day. I lowered my eyes to the cold food, my appetite gone. Around me, the celebration roared on, the music swelled, and no one noticed the silence inside me. I pushed back my chair slowly, careful not to make a sound. I walked toward the exit, my footsteps drowned out by the band's triumphant notes. Not a single head turned. Outside, the night air was sharp against my skin. I stood for a long time beneath the twinkling lights strung across the courtyard, listening to the muffled cheer inside. My hand clenched the envelope still tucked in my purse, the gift I had planned to give him. I realized then I could not. He had already thrown away what was most precious: my dignity, my love, my years of sacrifice. What use was money when respect was gone? I left before the night ended, slipping away like a shadow. No one called after me. No one followed. Back in my small room beside the garage, I sat on the bed and stared at the walls. The laughter from earlier echoed in my mind, growing louder, more distorted. My chest tightened until I thought it might split open. I pressed my fists against my mouth to stifle the sobs, but the tears came anyway, hot and relentless. I had always believed that no matter how hard life became, Michael would remember who I was. The woman who worked double shifts so he could go to college. The mother who patched his uniforms, cooked his favorite meals, held him when nightmares woke him. I believed love was something indestructible, a bond that could not be broken by time or by distance. But that night, I realized love could be buried under shame. When I finally lay down, sleep would not come. My mind replayed the day in endless loops. The dress, the seat at the back, the cold plate, the cruel joke. My heart ached with a grief that felt deeper than death, because this was the death of recognition, the erasure of everything I had ever given. And then, in the quiet hours before dawn, another memory surfaced. Michael at 5 years old, his small hand gripping mine tightly as we crossed a busy street. He had looked up at me with those earnest eyes and said, "Don't worry, Mommy, I'll protect you." That little boy was gone, replaced by a man who laughed at my humiliation. The contrast hollowed me out. The tears returned, but they burned differently this time. Shame turned into anger, a slow, smoldering fire that crept into my veins. They thought I was weak. They thought I would swallow their cruelty and keep living as if nothing happened. But as the first rays of light crept through the small window, I sat up straight. My eyes were swollen, but there was clarity in them now. I would not remain invisible. I would not be the butt of their jokes, the silent guest in a house that should have been mine. They believed I had nothing left to give, no power left to claim. But they were wrong. And soon Michael would learn just how wrong he had been. The morning after the wedding, I moved through the house like a ghost. Michael and Sophie were still asleep upstairs, no doubt exhausted from their night of celebration. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the list Sophie had left me the week before. Groceries, chores, schedules, as if I were an employee and not a mother. My chest tightened as the memory of Michael's cruel words echoed again. I knew I couldn't continue like this, living in silence while my dignity was stripped away piece by piece. For the first time, instead of burying my doubts, I began to listen to them. Why did Sophie always insist on handling the finances? Why was every bill addressed to her? Why did Michael avoid conversations about money, brushing them aside with a quick, "Sophie takes care of it"? My intuition, the same instinct that had once helped me detect illness in patients before tests confirmed it, whispered that something was terribly wrong. That afternoon, while Sophie took Emma to a playdate, I walked quietly to the small study where they kept their files. I had dusted that room enough to know where things were stored. My hands trembled as I opened the drawer and pulled out a thick folder labeled House. Inside, I found the contract from the purchase. Pages of numbers and legal jargon. At first, nothing stood out. But then I saw the figure. The down payment amount matched almost exactly the total from the sale of my old home. My breath caught. I flipped through the pages again, tracing the lines with my finger, as if the numbers would rearrange themselves into something less damning. But the truth was written clearly. The money I had given, the house I had sacrificed, had built these very walls. I had not been invited to stay out of kindness. I had been lured here with my own blood. Shaken, I replaced the file carefully, terrified they would notice my intrusion. But something inside me had already cracked open. I could no longer ignore the gnawing suspicion that I was being deceived on more than one front. That night, when everyone was asleep, I pulled out my own small notebook where I had kept track of my pension withdrawals. For years, I had been meticulous, writing down every check, every deposit. But as I compared my notes with recent bank statements Sophie had casually left on the counter, I noticed gaps. Amounts were missing, small at first, then larger, as if someone had grown bolder with time. I went back further, checking month after month, my pulse racing faster with each discrepancy. The total missing was not just careless error, it was deliberate. My pension, my only lifeline, was being siphoned away. At the bottom of the folder, tucked beneath old receipts, I found copies of withdrawal forms. My stomach lurched when I saw my name scrawled across the signature lines. But it wasn't my handwriting. It was close, practiced, but off, like an impersonation by someone who thought they could pass unnoticed. The room spun around me. My knees weakened as the weight of realization pressed down. It wasn't just disrespect or neglect or a cruel joke at a wedding. This was theft, betrayal, calculated and systematic. They hadn't simply forgotten me. They had been feeding off me, draining me while pretending to shelter me. I clutched the papers in my hands, the false signatures burning into my skin like acid. My voice shook as I whispered to the empty room, "Who are you, Michael? What have you become?" I slid the documents back exactly as I found them, careful not to disturb their order. But I couldn't unsee what I had seen. Every smile from Sophie now looked like a mask, every silence from Michael a confession. My mind reeled with memories of the past months. Sophie rushing to the mailbox before I could, Michael deflecting whenever I mentioned expenses, the way they insisted I relax and let them handle everything. It all fit together now, each piece clicking into place with cruel precision. As dawn crept through the blinds, I sat once more at the kitchen table. The papers, the numbers, the false signatures, they had awakened something inside me. Pain, yes, but also resolve. I was not helpless. I was not voiceless. And yet, as much as the anger surged through me, another feeling clung to my chest: grief. Grief that my son, the boy who once held my hand and promised to protect me, was now complicit in stealing from me. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade because it came not from an enemy, but from the very flesh of my flesh. I closed my eyes, pressing the papers to my chest, willing myself to breathe. But when I opened them, I knew there was no going back. The last page I turned showed a withdrawal form dated only a week before the wedding. My name was there, bold across the bottom, but the letters were slightly crooked, the slant unfamiliar. My fingers traced it, my pulse pounding. And in that moment, the final thread of denial snapped. Because as I stared at it under the pale light of dawn, I realized the truth that froze my blood cold. The signature was not mine. The discovery of the forged signatures had already shaken me to my core, but something told me I hadn't reached the bottom yet. Betrayal, I realized, is rarely a single wound. It's a series of cuts, hidden in shadows, waiting to bleed you dry. And so I kept digging. One afternoon, while Sophie was busy hosting a luncheon for her friends and Michael was at work, I slipped once more into the study. My fingers moved with grim determination as I searched through their desk drawers. That was when I found the laptop, carelessly left open, the screen still glowing with unread emails. My heart raced as I scrolled. At first it was mundane, receipts, schedules, reminders. But then I saw it. An email thread between Michael and Sophie, its subject line innocuous, yet the words, "inside anything but." "We need to figure out when to move her out," Sophie had written. "She's taking up space. This isn't sustainable." Michael's reply stung more than any insult. "I know. I'll talk to her soon. It has to be done." My chest tightened as I read further. Sophie's words grew sharper, more venomous with each exchange. "Honestly, she's lasted longer than I expected. The woman just won't quit. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever die." I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth, fighting back a sob. The cruelty was not hidden, not softened. It was blatant, casual, as if they were planning to discard an old piece of furniture. And then, the twist of the knife. Another message, this one chilling me to the bone. "Emma needs to learn boundaries. I don't want her spending so much time with Eleanor. It's not healthy. My sweet Emma, the only light in this house, the only soul who reached for me without judgment, and now they were teaching her to pull away, to see me as something toxic. My vision blurred as tears streamed down my cheeks. It was not enough that they stripped me of dignity. They wanted to strip me of love, too. I closed the laptop slowly, every breath shuddering. For a long moment, I sat there, staring at the wall, the weight of their words pressing me into the chair. I could almost hear Sophie's laugh, could almost feel Michael's silence as he let her speak for both of them. But something shifted inside me. The grief hardened, turned sharp. I had spent my life as a healer, as a giver, as a mother who thought sacrifice would be rewarded with love. But love had been twisted into something unrecognizable, and if I kept waiting, they would consume what little remained of me. I wiped my face, straightened my back, and whispered to the empty room, "No more." That night, when the house was still, I began to gather. Papers from the study, screenshots of the emails, copies of the withdrawal slips. Every piece of evidence I could find, I tucked away carefully, methodically. I even retrieved an old recording device I once used during my nursing days to dictate notes. I placed it in the dining room, letting it capture Sophie's sharp remarks when she thought I wasn't listening. Days passed and my collection grew. Each document, each recording, was a brick in the wall I was building, a fortress of truth that would one day surround them. Still, in the quiet of the night, doubt crept in. Could I really do this? Could I confront my own son, the boy who once promised to protect me? I sought strength in the only place I knew. One evening, after Emma had been put to bed, I sat alone in my small room beside the garage. On the nightstand was a faded photograph of my late husband, Thomas. His steady eyes looked back at me, kind and unwavering, as if daring me not to falter. "Thomas," I whispered, my voice cracking, "give me the strength. I don't want to fight, but they've left me no choice. Help me stand tall one last time." The tears came again, but softer now, carrying not despair, but resolve. I opened my laptop and began to type. The subject line was simple, each letter striking like a drumbeat in my heart. For the son who forgot his mother. The body of the email was longer than I expected. Words poured out of me, heavy with truth, stripped of pretense. I told him what he had taken, what he had broken, and what he had chosen to forget. I reminded him of the boy he once was, the boy who held my hand and swore to protect me. Then I attached the files, scanned documents, screenshots, recordings, and finally the video clip from the wedding, captured by a relative, showing the moment he laughed as I was served the leftovers, the moment he made me the object of ridicule, the proof of his cruelty. I stared at the screen, finger hovering over the mouse. Behind me, the house was silent, but I could feel the weight of it pressing down, daring me to act. I thought again of Emma, of her small arms wrapped around my neck, her whisper in my ear, "I love you, Grandma." I would not let them take that from me. I would not vanish into silence. And so, with one steady breath, I clicked send. As the screen confirmed my action, a strange calm washed over me. I had crossed the line between victim and witness. The evidence was no longer hidden. It was in his hands now. I leaned back, the shadows deep around me, and whispered to the darkness, "There's no turning back." Michael opened his laptop on a quiet Sunday morning, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. He expected the usual, work emails, updates from colleagues, a reminder about bills Sophie insisted he ignore. But when he saw the subject line, "For the son who forgot his mother," his hand froze on the mouse. A chill passed over him. He clicked. The email unfolded like a wound reopening. Attached were scanned copies of legal documents, every page screaming with truth. The deed to the house with my name etched firmly as the owner. The pension withdrawals, forged with clumsy signatures that were supposed to be mine but never were. Line after line of theft exposed, undeniable. His face drained of color. His hand trembled so violently the coffee spilled across the desk. "Michael," Sophie appeared in the doorway, her robe cinched tightly, her voice sharp with irritation. "What now?" Wordlessly, he turned the screen toward her. She leaned in, expecting something trivial, but when her eyes landed on the evidence, her composure cracked. She scrolled frantically, her breath quickening. This isn't real," she stammered. "She's making it up." But then she reached the video attachment. Her finger hovered, hesitant, before pressing play. The screen filled with the image of the wedding banquet, of me sitting quietly at the back, plate of cold food in front of me. Then Michael's voice rang out. "She's used to eating what life leaves behind." Sophie's laughter followed, cruel and echoing. The guests' chuckles sealed the humiliation. I had written beneath the video, "You laughed because you thought I was weak." But the truth is this: the house you think is yours, the roof you sleep under belongs to me. You thought I would always take what was left over. But this time, what's left is everything. And it's mine. Michael slammed the laptop shut, his chest heaving. "What did you do?" His voice broke, a mixture of fear and rage. I stepped into the doorway then, silent until now. My presence startled them both. Michael's eyes widened, Sophie's face twisted with fury. "I did what you forced me to do," I said calmly. My voice was steady, though my heart thundered in my chest. "I showed you who really holds this house, and I've spoken to a lawyer. Sophie, forging signatures is a crime. You might want to prepare yourself." For the first time, Sophie's mask slipped entirely. "You spiteful old woman," she hissed. "We gave you a place here, and this is how you repay us?" I lifted my chin. "A place? You put me in a room by the garage, treated me like an unwanted guest, drained my savings, and laughed at my humiliation. That is not a place. It is a prison, and I will not live in it anymore." Michael's lips moved, but no words came. He stared at me, then at Sophie, torn between guilt and fear. His silence was an admission louder than any confession. "I didn't want it to come to this," I said softly, almost to myself. "But you left me no choice." Sophie's face burned red. She tried to twist the narrative, spitting accusations about ingratitude and manipulation. But every word rang hollow against the undeniable weight of evidence. The walls she had built with lies crumbled with each passing second. From the hallway, a small voice called out, "Emma." She had woken early and wandered downstairs. Her eyes were wide as she looked from Sophie's contorted anger to Michael's ashen face to me, standing tall for the first time in years. "Grandma?" she whispered. I bent down, opening my arms. She ran to me, clutching me tightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't want you to go away," she sobbed. "I love you." Sophie rushed forward, but I held Emma protectively, glaring at the woman who had tried to poison her against me. "She will learn the truth one day," I said firmly, "and she will know who stood by her and who tried to take everything away." The room dissolved into chaos. Michael shouting, Sophie screaming, Emma crying into my shoulder. But through the noise, I felt only calm. The storm I had dreaded was here, but I was no longer drowning. I was standing in the eye of it, unshaken. I pressed a kiss to Emma's hair, then set her gently aside. I turned to Michael one last time. "You thought I had nothing, but I have everything I need, the truth and the strength to walk away." I picked up my bag, the evidence already secured with my lawyer. Behind me, the house that was mine erupted in angry voices and desperate excuses. As I stepped through the doorway, leaving them to their unraveling, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I could breathe. And as I walked into the morning light, I knew one thing with certainty: I was free. I left their house without looking back, carrying only a small suitcase and the weight of my memories. My lawyer had assured me that the property was legally mine, but I did not want it anymore. The walls of that house were poisoned. It had been built from my sacrifice, yes, but it had also become the stage of my humiliation. Instead, I asked him to help me sell it. With the money from the sale, along with what remained of my pension once we proved the theft, I bought a modest apartment across town. The new place wasn't grand, but it was mine. The keys jingled in my hand the first morning I unlocked the door, and I stood in the empty living room breathing in the silence. It smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I bought furniture one piece at a time, choosing only what I loved. For the first time in years, no one rolled their eyes at my choices. No one dictated where I should sit, what I should cook, or how long I could stay in the kitchen. Michael came to see me a month later. His face was thinner, his eyes shadowed with regret. He stood in the doorway of my apartment, holding his hat like a boy unsure if he was welcome. "Mom," he began, voice heavy. "I'm sorry. I didn't see what I was doing to you. I let Sophie—" I raised my hand gently. "Michael," I said, my voice calm, "I am no longer the mother who waits quietly for scraps of kindness. You once laughed that I was used to eating what life leaves behind, but no longer. From now on, I choose the best for myself." Tears gathered in his eyes. He nodded, but he knew the damage ran deeper than any apology could reach. Sophie, meanwhile, faced an investigation for financial fraud. My lawyer had handed the evidence to the authorities. I heard whispers that her social circle had shrunk, friends pulling away from the scandal. For once, consequences had come to those who believed themselves untouchable. Emma was the only one who still reached for me. One afternoon, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a crayon drawing of the two of us holding hands, standing in front of a house with flowers in the yard. Beneath it, in uneven letters, she had written, "I miss you, Grandma. Can I visit you? Love, Emma." I pressed the paper to my chest, tears welling. No betrayal could erase the bond between a grandmother and a child. I wrote back, promising she was always welcome, that she would always have a place with me. Nights in my new apartment were quiet, but not lonely. I cooked meals I hadn't made in years, filling the kitchen with the smell of roasted chicken, fresh herbs, and bread. I sat at the table with a single candle lit, savoring each bite. There was no laughter at my expense, no cold plates, no scraps, only peace, chosen and earned. One evening, I opened an old leather-bound journal and began to write. The words spilled like water, long held back. I wrote about the greed that had corroded my family, the ambition that blinded my son, the cruelty that flowed so easily from Sophie's tongue. I wrote about how envy and pride had turned love into contempt. And yet, I also wrote about strength, the kind that blooms in silence, the kind that rises after humiliation. I realized then that being denied recognition for all I had given hurt more than any physical wound. To be treated as though my years of sacrifice meant nothing, to be erased in the eyes of my own child, that was the deepest cut. But it was also the wound that forced me to stand, to reclaim myself, to choose life over survival. I closed the journal, feeling lighter. The lesson was carved into me now. No one, not even family, had the right to make me a guest in the home I built, in the life I shaped. No one deserves to be treated as if they are just staying over in their own story. On the last page, I wrote words that had become my vow. I am not here to take leftovers anymore. I will take the best portion for myself without apology. That night, I prepared a simple meal: steamed vegetables, roasted chicken, a glass of wine. I plated it carefully, sat at my small table, and smiled as the candle flickered. For the first time in decades, I felt no bitterness in my mouth, only the sweetness of freedom. I lifted my fork and whispered into the quiet room, "I no longer eat what life leaves behind. From this day forward, I choose the finest portion for me."